Hi, I'm Rob Taylor for Tuts Plus, and in this video tutorial I'm going to look at working with video in Photoshop and its general editing capabilities. First things first, let's get started with importing. There's no significant difference between opening video files and opening still images in Photoshop. You can use the usual techniques. Just file open and select a video file to open it that way. And it appears right here in the timeline palette. If you don't have a timeline palette appearing in your workspace, it's right here at the bottom of the window menu. Alternatively, you can click the plus sign at the end of a video group to add more once you already have your initial video imported, or you can use drag and drop. There are two different alternatives. With drag and drop, you can either drag it onto a non-workspace area like a layers palette or a history palette, which will open it in a new tab as a video, or you can drag and drop it into the workspace itself, where a white line will appear around the workspace indicating that it's going to open it as a smart object. Video files and smart objects are color-coded in the timeline, purple for smart objects, blue for video files, and they're also differentiated through different icons in the layers palette. Here's the film strip for a video file and the smart object icon. Photoshop can open pretty much all of the popular video formats, including MOVs and MP4s, from recording devices. To import audio, you can either click the plus on the audio track, right here. It doesn't differentiate between video and audio, so if you're working on a project with a lot of different media types, that can get quite frustrating. Alternatively, click on the audio track icon and hit add audio. Make sure your audio track is in something cross-platform like AAC, M4A or MP3, because Photoshop has issues with lesser used proprietary format like WMA. Once you have your footage imported, it's on to editing. Photoshop's editing capabilities are fairly simplistic. You're pretty much limited to cutting, trimming, and adjusting playback speed. Cutting is very simple. You just go to the frame you want to cut at, make sure the video clip is selected, and hit the little scissors icon in the timeline palette, and it makes a cut. If you need it to be more precise, you can use this little navigator style zoom slider right there. And here I am on 8 seconds 9th frame, and Photoshop will make the cut immediately prior to this frame number 9 when I cut like that. So the end of the first clip is frame 8 and the new clip starts on frame 9. You can trim the ends of a clip simply by grabbing them and moving them. When this little move icon appears, a live thumbnail with updated end time and duration will appear, as you can see on screen. The move icon for trimming will also snap to the playhead like that. There we go. So you can actually pre-select a trim time and have it be more precise that way. Whenever you trim, Photoshop will immediately snap all of the other clips in the group into place so that it remains one continuous video. To change the play speed of a clip, simply right click on it and use this speed control slider to adjust the playback speed. The limit is 4 times in either direction. So for doing time lapse, you can only get 400% speed. The only way around that limitation is by rendering the clip out, re-importing it, and redoing the playback speed control. When you are changing the speed to a slower speed, creating a slow-mo effect, you will actually have to manually drag out the duration in order to actually retain the true length of that modified clip, because the duration control only changes automatically when a speed increase forces it to reduce the clip length. Editing a smart object layer is the same as normal, but you don't have the immediate controls like you do on regular video clips. You actually have to edit the contents of the smart object, which is the video clip. To do that, you can simply right click on the appropriate layer and hit edit contents, or double click on the layer thumbnail with the smart object icon, and this box shows up to tell you what to do in order to save the effects. It will appear in a new tab, PSB, that's a smart object. So here you can make your changes like so, and then simply hit Ctrl S to save. You can now close the tab and your changes will be reflected there. You can see that the purple clip is now shorter because I've sped it up. Don't rasterize a smart object video, because what happens is that it simply becomes a single frame. If the playhead is not over that piece of video, it's simply the first frame, or if it is, it's the frame that it's currently on that becomes rasterized. So, just a word of warning there. Once you have your video chopped up and edited together, there may be one or two places where you need a transition. In Photoshop, those are right here. You'll notice they are really quite limited. There isn't even a wipe, never mind all the Movie Maker, iMovie transitions. A wipe is actually still technically possible using a layer mask and keyframing, which I'll show in a little bit. The different fades, because they're all fades, the different fades will behave slightly differently, and each individual one can be placed in different places at the join for slightly different results. If you want, say, a regular fade to fade out and then immediately cut in the new clip, then you would put it all on this side. If you wanted the first clip to suddenly end and then the new clip to fade in, you would put it right here. And if you wanted them to sort of fade out and then in all in one step, then you could put it right here. A crossfade, on the other hand, will fade them both in and out at the same time, and there it goes, overlapping them. It actually even brings in the rest of the video in order to achieve that overlap. Fade with black, fade with white, fade with color are all essentially the same thing. Fade with color allows you to choose a color instead of just being a regular fade, which goes to transparency. Those add a solid block color that the fade can transition through. Adding effects to videos in Photoshop is actually fairly straightforward. All of the adjustment layers are still available as normal. If you want to apply an effect to a particular layer, in fact it's already done it right there, created a clipping mask. You can then undo that if you wanted to apply to all of those. but which one is this? It's this one, so we have to put the playhead over where we're looking at in order to be able to see it. And then we can manipulate this adjustment layer. Regular effects are also available. Unfortunately, if you apply them to a normal video file, this is theoretically possible, but quick Gaussian blur on this. Notice that it is only actually applied to a single frame. If we want that Gaussian blur to apply to every frame, we need to apply it to a smart object. Now you can convert a regular video clip to a smart object, no problem. It then becomes purple, that's fine. So the smart object can have filters applied to it as smart filters. So now we go to this one and apply the same big Gaussian blur, and you can see it applies as a smart filter, and the layer thumbnail gets the filter applied to it, and the whole video is blurred. Now you can use that for basically any filter, but bear in mind if you use some fairly hefty filters. I go with color effects here briefly. There, it'll act as a smart layer. We'll give it a bleach bypass and turn contrast, brightness, there we go, boom, done. But then try and play this back, and it suddenly gets very interesting. You can see right here my playback speed as soon as it updates. Nope, it skipped so many frames that it wouldn't even refresh the frame speed. That's pretty slow. So be careful about what you add. You may need to render it straight out immediately and then re-import if you have to have a particular very heavy duty filter on a clip. Like After Effects, layer properties can be keyframed under here within the video group. Unlike After Effects, nothing else other than what you see here can be keyframed, nor can you do any scripting like wiggle or anything like that. If you want to keyframe a filter, you would have to produce a duplicate layer with the filter on, and then keyframe that layer's opacity in comparison to the original layer underneath. As I mentioned earlier, there's no wipe transition, so on the off chance you want to do that, this is how I would do it.
Let's see, I'll do it like that, put it about there.
If you just want a basic wipe side to side, layer masks get a couple of basic keyframe properties. You can turn them on and off, and you can change their position. This is enough for a basic wipe. So if we zoom in, so if we take this 1 second here and add a wipe to it, right here, we can add a layer mask enable on the frame before. We'll add another layer mask enable keyframe and then turn the layer mask off. As you can see, skipping back and forth between the two layers, that turns the layer mask on at the precise moment we want it to. Then, if we turn the layer mask black, and then we can also keyframe its position. We'll add a position keyframe at the very beginning and one at the very end, and then returning to the beginning one, we will move the layer mask, making sure it's unhooked from the layer itself. We'll move it all the way off screen. Now when we play that back, we should get that. Fairly straightforward use of keyframing. I'm generally assuming you're never going to wipe anyway, in, if nothing else, the interest of good taste, Star Wars notwithstanding, but that little demonstration should be a fairly reasonable idea of what's physically possible with the available keyframe properties. More useful effects could be done by turning on and off layer masks like frame in frame, or even split frame for, say, interviews. Or I'm sure there are a number of other possibilities that I haven't thought of yet that you may come up with. Layer style right here can be fully keyframed, which is fairly handy, but unfortunately the blending mode of the layer can't. So again, you would have to use a duplicate layer's opacity in conjunction with the original layer's opacity and combine them both together with keyframes to recreate the effect of keyframing the single layer's layer blending. Editing audio is basically the same as editing video. It's not exactly Photoshop's strongest suit though, mainly because unfortunately there is no waveform, so you can't base your cutting decisions on any visible representation, and ultimately just have to play the video, hit pause as close as you can to where you need to cut, and cut there. Some audio clip duplication and trimming back and forth may be necessary to get the cut in exactly the right place. You can't separate audio from video. So, if you need to chop up the audio in a video clip and move it around, then all you can do is duplicate the clip and edit the lower hidden layer. You're not limited to just one track though. If you need to overlap audio clips for any synchronous effects, then you can just hit the audio track menu icon and go to new audio track, and it puts it in right underneath. Okay, we have our video sliced and diced, we've added our effects, and we've put in the audio tracks. Now it's time to export it. Photoshop supports just 3 export tracks. Go to Export File, Export Render Video, and it gives us the options right here, using Adobe Media Encoder to create a video rather than a still image sequence. We can choose either DPX, MP4, or QuickTime. DPX stands for Digital Picture Exchange. It's a film and TV industry intermediate standard for post-production. It can contain lots of metadata about what's going on in the video and when, where it came from, film scans, etc. It's generally not much use to photographers for our purposes. H.264 is actually the codec, but it means in this instance MP4. You have various quality and size options right there, and QuickTime gives us the usual animation with its qualities, JPEG 2000 with its qualities, and uncompressed. Uncompressed looks very good, but this file sizes are absolutely huge. If you didn't resize your video, but you want to render it out at a lower size, that's easily done. Let's stick 1280 in here by 720, and the size automatically updates to 720p. You can choose that from any of these if you want either. Frame rate, generally best to keep it at the original frame rate. Progressive, which we usually want, and aspect ratio, square pixels, that's also what we want since we're not usually doing it for TV. Range all frames, usually what you're doing if you're rendering out an entire project. Alternatively, if you want a particular clip, for instance, or a sample to send to someone, you can use the start and end frame options. That's generally the basics of rendering out the video. There are other options which are used for more in-depth effects work, particularly going into things like After Effects. But generally what we want is all in this area here. You can select the folder that you move it into up here, and you have the option to create a subfolder if you so choose. Once you have everything done here, you can hit render, and it will create a progress bar right here with no time on it. But you don't really need a time since renderers tend to lie about how long they're going to take anyway. Okay, that's the general workflow for editing video in Photoshop. I hope this video has been a useful guide to those of you who are interested in video editing but don't have a full Creative Cloud subscription or a separate nonlinear editor. I know a couple of you have told me that you didn't even know Photoshop had the ability to edit video at all, so this should have been helpful for you guys. And thanks everyone for watching. If you have any questions or comments, hit up the comments below.